Hello, everyone. Welcome to Publication Day for Janet Steele Holloway, Rabbit House Press's latest book, Janet's Ain't Nobody's Business If I Do. Yay! Congratulations, Janet.
It's been a long time coming.
I'm very, very, very excited.
Thank you.
For everybody that's joining us, this is Erin Chandler. I'm Erin Chandler, and this is my partner, Emily Wilhoit.
Hello, everybody.
And we are Rabbit House Press. We are a small publishing company out of Versailles, Kentucky. And we are very excited about this latest book by Janet Steele Holloway. Hi, Janet.
Hi, Erin. Hi, good to see you.
Janet.
See you.
Hi.
So I wanted to start. We're going to do a few readings. Hopefully, Janet will read a few excerpts. But just to give a rundown of what this memoir is, this collection of stories is, Janet, how do you usually describe it? And then I'll chime in.
Okay, well, it relates very much to the first two books I've published, which is A Willful Child and Leaving. Sometimes you have to leave.
Wonderful books, both.
And those two are memoirs. The first one at my growing up in West Virginia and Florida, and going to college at Marshall University. And the second book is about being on my own, basically, leaving home and up through the time I came to Kentucky. And this book really fills in the corners and cracks of those other two books. These are stories dedicated to my grandmother and about my grandmother. Who
Now, stopping right there, this is so fascinating. Tell who Billie is, your grandmother.
Well, my grandmother was an amazing woman who grew up on a farm in Virginia. And at about 16, she inherited the farm when her father died. And she was responsible for her 6 brothers and sisters. She managed to organize them to work the farm. And long story, she eventually met and married a man who was a moonshiner. And they moved to West Virginia, where they continued the moonshine business, going up to Chicago and Cleveland and Bristol, Tennessee, and other places. My grandmother had a 3rd grade education, but she was smart as anybody I've ever met. And she liked to have her way. And this book is about her. Ain't nobody's business but my own. And the words to that Bessie Smith song is, if I take a notion to jump into the ocean, ain't nobody's business but my own. And if I go to church on Sunday and then party all day Monday, ain't nobody's business if I do. Well, this is really
so much that she named your mother Bess.
That's right. In the story, she does. I don't use my mother's real name. Which happens to be Melba, because I don't want to. I just changed her name.
Okay. So that's I want to get into that, because what the memoir really is 3 generations of women and how they're affected by that. And in this small Appalachian town, I love the way you describe it, that most of the memories come from the bottom of the hills where the Appalachian Mountains soften into the foothills, and that's where on that corner where most of your memories. But your mother, your grandmother found your mother when she was 2 weeks old in the hills of West Virginia, and she was a baby for sale.
Yeah,
purchased.
Yeah.
And she was this tough woman, and she said, nobody, that's my baby, and she was just,
that's my baby.
That's my baby. And the way that you describe that, and then growing up with your mother having, obviously, because your grandmother had all of these siblings and that whole dynamic of all the other women in the family and this baby that she just adored and this woman that basically the whole town, revered and feared. And the land, can you tell us a little bit about that? It's the Hatfield and McCoy land.
It's yeah, my grandmother, as I said, left the farm in Virginia. She had her siblings working the farm, and she came to West Virginia with her moonshining husband. And they continued to do moonshine, take it up to Chicago, take it to Cleveland. And she was a very
This is
strong
19, I'm sorry, 19.
1920, 22.
20.
Yeah. And she had lost a child due to pneumonia just maybe a year or so prior to hearing about this child for sale. She heard about a child for sale. She couldn't believe it, but she said, I'm going to check this out. And she ended up, and we don't know if she purchased her or just took her. One of her brothers said of her, I wouldn't put it past Billie to have given the woman some moonshine so she could get that baby.
Yes, yes.
I don't know.
Right. And what a legacy for your mom, and which you explained very well, how she was restless and felt so different from her cousins, and then eventually we get to you, the willful child, who is who your grandmother raised, and your mom was, needless to say, restless and from her upbringing. But you put.
Would you like me to read a little piece from the poem?
I would love for you to read the whole piece from the poem. Let me make this.
It's awfully long. I've cut it back a little bit for reading, but I'll give you the most of it. It's called Where I Come From.
Okay.
I come from Hatfield land, where legend is a close neighbor, where old Devil Anse Hatfield will get you if you break the rules or disobey your elders, where someone you know is a cousin, a nephew, a half-sister, part of the original clan, where a taller than life-size statue cut in creamy Carrara marble stands high on the closest hill amid pokeberry and poison ivy, surveying all that was once his land, where occasional tourists climb a weeded path to show respect or swap stories about the feud. I come from hillbillies, barely educated families who ate the food they grew, passed down used clothes and shoes, well past dreaming of a future. I come from a mother who knew nothing about her birth family, who suffered from what doctors called nerves, and who treated her with Valium and lithium while she treated herself to alcohol and sad escapes from our family life. I come from a father who labored underground and who always took her back. I come from a time where trouble came from within families and kids were parceled out for protection, where alcohol drained life from strong men and fragile women. I come from a moonshining grandmother who carried a gun, who loaned money and gave respite, who fed and clothed those who needed it, bought votes at election time to ensure her point of view, who knew most people's secrets and used her power to protect and get even. I come from the unrestrained yet tough love of this grandmother, who taught me to be strong, to stand up for what I believed, and to care for others. I may not be of her seed, but I am of her heart. That's the kind of the summary, if you will. It's a summary of the book, really, and there are more verses in there that kind of imply what's going to happen in the book. Yeah.
I love that. Emily, what do you think? You pop in, I've been blabbing so much. What were your impressions when you?
Right. When I read the poem, I wondered, had you written the poem before you wrote the book?
No,
Or during?
I wrote it during the writing of the book. I took inspiration really from Georgella Lyons and her poem, Where I'm From. And that just inspired me to try to write my own story. And it sort of came all at once. I don't know how it did, but it came. The creative powers were working.
Really is.
Well, go ahead.
I just say it's beautiful.
I imagine that when you have to ask yourself that question, you might even be surprised at the answers you find in the writing of the answers.
Always. It's always,
Yeah.
writing is discovery. And part of the reason I wrote these 3 books was, in a way, these people couldn't leave my head. They were just wreaking havoc in my brain, talking, carrying on. And I thought, maybe I should write this down and capture what, for me, was my history, a big piece of my history.
I'm so glad you did, because I would love for you to talk about your life as a writer. And as I'm reading these stories, it's really amazing, because it's such a more than a snapshot of that part of the country, and a real in depth, where when I drive through Appalachia from here to North Carolina, and we go through Hazard and Eastern Kentucky and all of this, and you see these little houses dotted on the hills, you really, this is really truly, generations growing up there. And I wonder, because you had such a different life and ended up in New York City, which I want to get into, and all of this, it must be amazing with this rich rural history, like that made up, like you said, She Is of My Heart. And then you went on to, you can tell everyone what you did and are still doing from that seed, with this strength of Billie, your grandmother.
My grandmother told me when I was about 11, she said, a girl from West Virginia's got 3 choices. Number 1 is she can get pregnant. Number 2 is she can get religion. And number 3 is she can get out. And she pointed her finger and said, I hope you know the one to choose. Well, I did, because I knew if I got pregnant, they would turn me out of the house. I wouldn't be welcome. I wanted number 2 to work, religion. I wanted very much to have something to hold on to. I was baptized twice in the creek, and twice in the creek, once in a pool in the front of the church behind these drapes. And I think I've been sprinkled a couple of times. I'm not sure about that, but it never stuck. And so eventually I realized I had to get out, and that became my goal, to get out. And my parents separated a number of times, and so I would go with one or the other. And I lived
Florida, right? To where, Florida?
West Palm Beach and Tampa, Florida, lived there, lived on the farm in Virginia, worked on the farm in Virginia. And, but mostly I see my growing up in West Virginia in what is called Sarah Ann, but is Hatfield country. And my grandmother bought land from the Hatfields.
So can you, in a nutshell, for people that don't know, like me, the history, like what would you say, like the Hatfields and McCoys, they were just 2 families that were feuding, and there was murders. I mean, that the picture and the description of Anne's Hatfield, the patriarch of that family, who did dealings with your grandmother, and that she bought land from him, right? In the end,
she bought land from one of a trustee that he had turned the land over.
So what would you say that Hatfields and McCoys in a nutshell? What was that about?
Oh, it was just, a bunch of boys who got drunk and liked to fight, and one clan killed somebody in their family, and so they got to even. And it was a way of life, really, in Appalachia, that you settled scores.
Right.
And, but I grew up knowing Devil Anse Hatfield was buried not even a half a mile from my house, and I could see the statue of him. And my grandmother used to point that out and say, if you don't do this or do that, old Devil Anse will get you.
And in the book is a picture of him and the clan, and really amazing. It's just so fascinating to see the faces of these people.
He actually was a fairly well-educated person.
Mhm.
He identified with the, I guess, the upper middle class in Logan County, West Virginia, over time. And it was his boys who carried on the feud for the most part.
Right, right. Wow. Well, so tell me about your life as a writer started later, but I want to talk just because that's one of my favorite things about your life in the theater in New York City.
Oh, right, right. Well, I I got a full scholarship, a 4-year scholarship to Marshall University. And so that was my freedom. That was the beginning of my getting out. And my senior year, I eloped, got married to a guy who was a college friend. And we went to Detroit, where I taught high school Spanish and English. He got a job in New York City as assistant director to a wonderful director, Bill Ball, the American Conservatory Theater Company. And was very prominent, and they liked his work. He was a director and writer. And so after a while, I followed and worked as a receptionist and one thing and another, and worked for artists and writers, and worked for the Frick Collection, which I loved. It was a wonderful experience. And I had all these wonderful experiences in New York, working in theater companies and
Can you do costume design and
I did costume work. I wouldn't say it was design. I hemmed, I patched, I cleaned,
yes,
but nothing very prominent. But I
but the
love
important things of the theater.
yeah, the things that need to be done. Right.
Right.
And I did all that. I was never an actress, didn't want to be an actress. But I loved being backstage. And my husband ended up leaving that company. And so I left with him. And he wrote and put together a play with Heather McRae, Joel McRae's daughter, which got good reviews off Broadway in New York. But eventually we went our separate ways. Just, I was young. Went back to West Virginia and said, no, I can't stay here. I'm going back to New York. Went back and slept on friends' couches and did whatever, I had to do to make a living. Eventually, met someone else and married, and worked in substance abuse education, which was
In
community.
Harlem. Is that where you did in Harlem?
I
What
did some of that in East Harlem
East
on
Harlem?
116th Street. Yeah. And in fact, I was there when Martin Luther King was shot.
Are you?
And I've written a blog about that, about what that experience was like, because my boss at the community center gave me $5 and said, go home. You're trouble to us up here, being a white woman. And
Oh,
so
Wow.
it was a scary time. But eventually I, did several other things. I became state director of small business development in New Jersey. I became president of the National Association, and I was offered a job here in Kentucky. This is how I came to Kentucky. I'd gotten out of the theater just to survive, because you really can't make a living, as you well know.
yes. I well know. Yeah.
And I came here and ran the Kentucky Small Business Development Center network, covered the entire state. Yeah.
Wow. And is that how you began, which is very exciting for all of these Kentucky women and the people that have poured in and talked to me about what an amazing influence you are in their lives, because you started Women Leading Kentucky.
Yeah. I was at UK 9 years running the small business development, SBDC, as I called it. And as I went around the state, I met women who were starting businesses, but didn't know how to promote themselves, didn't know how to, stand up and talk about themselves and their products and all of that. And I thought, they don't have any networks. Men have bars. This was 1990. Men had bars and golf. Women had nothing. And I realized that I wanted to help women develop their strengths and their abilities as businesswomen. So I left the university, no job, no money. I took early Social Security and money from that I had saved in order to survive the first 2 years of building Women Leading Kentucky. Yeah, it's now in its 23rd year. Yeah.
Wow.
That's a leap of faith.
amazing. What, Emily?
I said that's a leap of faith. You had very modest startup resources and your self-reliance, I suppose, and just a belief in what you could do and why you needed to do it.
It was a passion. It was a passion. And I called together 5 or 6 women that were prominent in Kentucky. I mean, they weren't, they were like CPAs and bank officials and so forth. About 5 or 6 women, and I told them what my dream was. And they all said, well, yeah, we need it. How can we help? And I said, well, become a board member. So you are my board. And that was how I got started. And I didn't have a salary for a couple of months, but I knew I needed a champion also that would be the one that basically spoke to people that I couldn't reach. Right. And I went to Martha Lane Collins.
I love her. I love her so
straight
much.
to the top. And I told her what I was trying to do. And she said, and I wanted her on my board. And she said, well, I don't like being on boards where we don't do anything. And I said, oh, do we have a job for you? I said, we have so much work to do. And she came on and is still linked, in a less official way with Women Leading Kentucky. She was very, very helpful in the beginning. Yeah.
Well, it's such an amazing organization. Janet took me to one of their meetings, and so many women with all of these different, in all different walks of life and working on all these different businesses, and the speaker that was there and all of the sponsors of all the different things, which I'm still looking at the Alaska. Pardon me?
And exhibitors who had.
And exhibitors, yes, I'm still getting emails because I want to do one of those Alaskan cruises. I'm like, there was one exhibitor about Alaskan cruises, and I'm like, I want to go. Okay, well, all of this is so fascinating just in your life, and you really are an amazing writer. And I want you to read another excerpt from this book, but were you writing this whole time? Did you tamper writing plays or anything like that? Or did you start?
I just I always wanted to write, and as a child I wrote poetry and stories and things like that, but I never really took the time to write serious personal stories until I retired. Well, a little before I retired from Women Leading Kentucky, 2012. I thought, I have all these people in my head, they're talking to me, I have to write about them. They're my family. They are my family.
They're who made you.
And so then I began to write, and maybe it was a couple of years before I retired, and in 2012 published that book. And then I retired and spent the next 4 years writing another book.
At the Carnegie Center, right? Correct? Didn't you?
Yeah. Yes. Carnegie Center has been very, very helpful to me, and I love it. I love what they do. Yeah.
Me too.
So I just didn't know if I could write or not, but I went there and I took a class, and in the first class, the teacher asked me to read something out loud, and I cried. I had never read anything out loud. I'm always starting something new, but this was really personal. So I got through it, and they liked my work and gave me good suggestions. And so I just continued writing as long as these voices were in my head.
And you know what's so amazing is that you never know. I mean, someone can go to school and be an English major, and they leave you hollow. And then someone, I teach memoir for the Carnegie Center, and started a new class, and someone will come and they'll say, oh, well, I've never written anything before. And it pours out of them. And it's so amazing. It's like, songwriting or painting or any kind of art form. It's, if you, and I call my thing memoir writing from the heart, because if it's really coming from your heart, and you can tell this is coming from your heart, like these people, they were chattering in your head. That's probably why it came out, these scenes, not only just the dialogue, but the scenes come out so clearly. And so, well, okay, well, let me do the speaker review again, and you can give us another taste of the book. Let me say, by the way, to anybody who's joining us, this book came out today. This is publication day, April 8th, and you can get the book at rabbithousepress.com, or you can get it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, Black Swan bookstores, other local bookstores. And our opening night party is this, if you're in the neighborhood, April 13th at the Carnegie Center, 5:30 to 7 at the Carnegie Center this April 13th. Janet will be signing books and reading, and we'll all be there celebrating.
Yay.
You want to hear something else?
Yes, please.
Yes.
I don't know it. Let's see. There's one story. It's called "Good Girls Don't Fight," and I open it with, "I've had 2 fist fights in my life. One was when I hit my brother on the head when he was a baby, and I was like 3 or 4, and the other is coming up." And so I'm going to jump a little bit into this. This fight was not planned. I was 11, almost 12. I was sitting quietly on the school bus, returning from an uneventful day in the 6th grade, resting, not talking to anyone, just looking out the window at the small towns we passed through on the way to my stop at Granny's place of business, the Pioneer Inn. Now, this was her beer garden, and we were living upstairs over the beer garden because the mines had closed, and my father had no work at that period of time. With the coal mines on strike and no payday, we were all back living with Granny upstairs. As we traveled up the narrow tarmac road to where the mountains came in close, I was daydreaming and listening to the chatter of my schoolmates. Nothing special on my mind when I heard Ellie Blankenship, 2 rows back, say, "Well, at least I don't have to live above a beer garden like she does." Without thinking, out of my seat in a flash, over the seat behind me, stepping on someone, grabbing her hair with one hand, pummeling Miss Ellie with the other. I don't know how I got there or what energy rush propelled me. It happened so fast, it was as if something else, one of the Furies maybe, took control of my body. The school bus drivers shouting, "What's going on back there?" didn't stop us. Ellie was shocked, and her response delayed. Her kicking only scuffed the back of the seat in front of her. We wrestled into the aisle, me on top, hitting her over and over with my fist, her screaming, trying to protect her face and push me off. She finally got hold of my hair, pulled me down toward her, and I bit into the softness of her new breasts and kept throwing punches. By the time some other kids got between us, I had ripped her shirt, bloodied her nose, and given her a titty bruise she'd have a hard time explaining. Okay, that's it.
Oh my goodness.
I was a willful child.
You were a willful child. Oh my goodness. Well, I can't wait to get this book out to everyone. Emily, what and you want to say anything else?
Yeah, I just was curious. What are the Furies?
Oh,
The Furies are from the Greek drama days, and it was like a chorus, and
Okay.
they were Furies who stood alongside the actors.
the 3 Furies that
Gotcha.
the 3
Yeah.
Furies that they have. You know, the in what was that? George Clooney was in that movie. The musical. Oh my God, the musical.
Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou? You know,
Right, yeah.
go to sleep, little baby. You know, the 3 women in the water.
They were the Furies.
They were the Furies. They pop up everywhere. But I loved when he.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha. It seems like there's a lot of Greek mythology that intertwines with Appalachian sensibilities and spirituality. I don't
Yeah.
know if that's true, but maybe
Well,
you
if you
do.
went to school, you were told to read the Greeks, the Romans, the Greeks, and all of that. So I had 4 years of Latin. you know, and many of the stories in my Latin class book were about the Greeks. So,
Wow.
yeah,
That sounds like you had a very thorough education.
I had a pretty good education, I have to say. I had good teachers. They encouraged me to stay in school. They told me I was smart. Nobody else was telling me I was smart, you know, my granny, but nobody else. So
This
it
is
was,
in West Virginia?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Because I know there's a lot of initiative in the 60s to go and fortify the educational systems in the mountains.
right. Yeah,
But you were privileged or I guess fortunate to have access to that
some of
educational
some
system
of them,
already.
some of them, you know,
Some of
Right.
them.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
That's
Fascinating. I just love Appalachian culture, and I'm thrilled that this book is out, and I'm so excited to be a part of Rabbit House Press, and I can't wait for
Thank,
this
thank,
party.
this
yeah, it'll be
first
fun.
Everybody
party.
needs to know about this.
I'll let everybody else know. I want to say before we close that we've got 2 other books at Rabbit House Press coming out this summer. One by Palmer Tolley and James Reardon, called Chronicles of Two Wolves. It is a Native American story, and which is really beautiful, and also mixes mythology in with his great
Mhm.
Joseph Campbell and um, autobiography and mythology. And we have a release of Robin Lippincot's Blue Territory, which is a meditation on the life and art of abstractionist artist Joan Mitchell, not
Oh,
Joan,
wow.
Joan Mitchell, which
Wow.
is very
Mhm.
excited about Blue Territory. So that's more this summer, but right now, anybody that can, please join us at the Carnegie Center, April 13th, this next Thursday night, to celebrate the release of Janet Steele Holloway's 3rd book, and first with Rabbit House Press, Ain't Nobody's Business If I Do. Thank you, Janet, so much. Congratulations.
You're welcome. Thank you for your help, Erin. I appreciate it.
Good to meet you. Can't wait to meet you in
Thanks,
person.
Emily. Same here. Thank you.
All right. Sure.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.